So, just to introduce myself, my name is Mrs. Bradley. I am the head of English at St Mark's School, but I am now Mrs. Lambourne, so if you hear either of those names, that's me. I have a degree in psychology, so I did a lot of study in the child development in itself when I was at university. I've been the head of English at St Mark for 4.5 years now, but I've actually been in Dubai for 8 years. I have 10 years teaching experience, so I have seen the ups and downs of reading from a very young age to now, and all of the barriers that we've faced every single year, because every single year it is different, believe it or not, and how we have tried to overcome them. I'm currently actually completing a project in school with reading in secondary and how we can try to encourage reading not just in English but also across all subjects, because as you know, it is not just about learning to read in English. They need to read and comprehend in every single subject they study, and it's a constant battle for us to help make children understand that reading isn't just about getting good grades in English, that it is about comprehension and word level understanding and vocabulary, everything like that. When I was in the UK, I worked across schools in Kent on reading projects and how we could encourage reading in schools. One thing that's been set up recently in school is the Globe Reads. So Miss Seema has set up this project that we have been connecting with schools around the world. So on Monday, myself and some students contacted a school in Ethiopia and we discussed a poem, and we're trying to kind of get students to understand that reading is a global thing and that we all are interested in the same topics and the same ideas and sharing the same interests with each other. And I also have a 1-year-old little boy, so I am on the beginning of that parenting journey with you guys and understanding ways that we can support and help the development of our children. So I just wanted to give you a little insight into what we currently do in school, especially in English with reading. So in their English lessons, the students will have 1 lesson a week that is dedicated to reading in the library. They also have a reading book with them. So every student essentially should have a reading book with them. I know sometimes they make excuses that they don't, but they should have one, because if at any point we need to do some reading, they have the book with them all the time. We also used readtheory.com. This is a website that you can access at home. I will show you on the next slide a little bit more about that. We use Century Tech to monitor not just reading but grammar and basic literacy skills. And we also, some of the students have a study session. So in those study sessions, they also have 1 lesson of reading in the study sessions which aren't English. Okay? So the Read Theory that we use is a website that we use at home. One of the questions I had was, why aren't we in line with primary in terms of reading? But we are, in the sense that we still have dedicated reading time. Now, we use the program Accelerated Reader in secondary as well as primary, but I did a survey with the students and I asked them their opinion on what they felt about Accelerated Reader. And they said that forcing them to have to read actually discouraged them from reading. And they said because there were students getting top ones because they were reading bigger books, it actually made them feel less likely to want to read, because they thought, well, they're never going to do well because that student's getting this and this student's getting that. So that's not the kind of environment or the feeling that we wanted to create. So we moved away from the Accelerated Reader and we moved on to the Read Theory. Now, the Read Theory is a free program that we use within school, and you can use it at home. And what happens is that they can read bits from novels, bits from non-fiction texts, and then they answer questions at the end, which monitors their comprehension. But it also adapts the text to their ability. So it actually works really well, because we had some Year 11 students doing it. They took the test. They did really badly because they didn't bother reading it properly. And then they were really embarrassed because they were reading something for a 7-year-old. And we said, well, why do you think that is? And they said, oh. So then they tried harder to make sure that they were reading it and they were answering the questions properly. So it worked in our favour in that sense, that the students didn't want to be seen to be reading at a lower level than what they were. So this has been much more encouraging for our students, and making sure that they're reading in those study sessions and in the library lessons as well. With the library lessons, though, we do this alongside their reading book, their story fiction reading book. So it is not just this, they have to have a storybook and a reading book with them as well. We obviously, yes, go on.
Are students graded on what did they read? Are they
On this,
Yeah.
they're not graded, but it shows you what they got out of the question, so we can see if the student's taken it properly or if they haven't.
So it's being monitored.
It is being monitored by the teachers, yes.
Is it relevant for primary?
So primary will still use Accelerated Reader, so they still have that program. Yeah, Accelerated Reader, where the Accelerated Reader, they choose a book, they take the quiz, and then they get a certain percentage out of 100.
Is it an app? Because I'm not really aware of Accelerated Reader.
It's not an app, but it is a website. I can put you on some more information on that. I can speak with the English in primary and I can give you some more information on that for sure, okay? I actually, we all made a video on this. I don't know if you're on the Sunmark Instagram channel, but there's a video on the Accelerated Reader and how we used it in primary and secondary last term. So it's definitely worth looking at that video that we made to inform parents on how to use it. So we also promote reading within school. So you'll notice that we just had World Book Day on last Friday. So what we did is we got the students to choose their favourite book and they had to decorate their form groups with their favourite books. We dressed up. I painted my face green for the occasion. So as you can see that we're trying to make a point to the students of the beauty of reading and why we should embrace it. Oh, is it? Great. Oh, and then we also have monthly library events. So we did a Halloween one, we did a European languages one, we did a Valentine's Day one, where we recommended books under that genre. And also we recently, which we found worked really well, when we were doing our library lessons, we had a share a story corner. It was for National Storytelling Week, but we had a share a story area and we got the students to read the book they were reading to the rest of the class. And we were really shocked with our secondary students at how well they engaged with that. And we actually found that sometimes doing things like that is better than just getting them to sit there independently and read, because you don't always trust that they are reading. Whereas something like this, where they have to have discussions and you have to ask them questions, really is helpful in making sure that they are engaging and understanding that book. So those are the things that we do in school with English. I know that we do a lot of things in other subjects. Business, for example, will read non-fiction business books. Modern foreign languages do a lot of vocabulary, of course, because they have to do the different languages. So yeah, reading is being promoted across the whole school and secondary. So I wanted to just show you this video. I don't know if you've seen this video before, but I just wanted to show you, and then I'll explain why I want to show you after. I wanted to show you that because I think it's really important to look at it from a child's perspective, but particularly because this is a 4-year-old boy. And studies have shown that there's a greater percentage of primary than secondary age that see themselves as a reader, and that there's a greater proportion of primary age readers and non-readers in secondary that believe that their friends saw readers as happy people with lots of friends. Okay? So what is it? Let me just... Sorry, it's stuck on the video. What is it that happens when they become a teenager? where that stops. So I did a bit of research myself. I asked my students, you'll see I have 3 Year 13 students with me today. They have helped me with this. We were thinking about the things that are barriers to our children's reading. Distractions these days, okay? Phones, iPads. Unfortunately, coronavirus and the COVID-19 pandemic has actually made it so that they're on it more than ever. And, you know, it's more difficult because there's always an excuse. I've got to do my work on my computer, or I've got to contact my friend about this. There's more excuses now for the students to be on the iPads and the devices than before. Another thing a couple of my students said, especially my IB students, was time. Finding the time to, you know, when you have a lot of studying and you have a lot of homework, finding the time to actually sit for yourself and do your reading. And obviously social media these days is taking over the students' lives in terms of TikTok dances or Instagram Live. And so these things are becoming a massive issue when it comes to the volume of children and their reading. There's also a huge gender gap still. So there's a number of studies that show that boys enjoy reading less than girls. Evidence has found that 58% of girls enjoy reading either very much or quite a lot in comparison to 43% of boys. In all countries, boys are not only less likely than girls to say that they read for enjoyment, they also have different reading habits when they do read for pleasure, with girls more likely to read the fiction books and the magazine, and boys more likely to read newspapers and comics. You know, it's not cool for a boy to tell their friends, oh, I like reading. And so even if they are a reader, they're very less likely to say that they do enjoy reading. Evidence has also shown from our PISA results that boys on average are 39 points below girls on reading. There is one study that shows that boys are reading as much as girls, however, they're reading easier books than girls. I have actually got some lists here. I will of course recommend it. If you do have boys and you have reluctant readers, I have a lad's list of reading, which are recommended books for boys specifically. So if you want to take one of those at the end, please feel free to do so. Of course, I'll recommend any books, but specifically we're trying to close that gender gap within school and make boys more interested in reading. It's a difficult challenge, but it's one that we are certainly interested in pursuing together. So, what are the benefits of reading for pleasure? I don't know why I'm doing this because Caleb explained it much better than I did, the little 4-year-old boy. But of course we know that there's a positive relationship between the frequency of reading for enjoyment and attainment. Okay, so it's not just about making them and forcing them to read. They have to read for enjoyment. The reading for enjoyment coincides with their attainment. Specifically in English, I know it's not right or wrong. The students get so frustrated with it because they haven't got a mark scheme that says, yes, this is right. But we try to explain to them that reading will help them to broaden their vocabulary, understand sentences, lengths, and how they're used for effect, all those kinds of things that reading gives you and how they can apply that to their own work. There's a growing body of evidence which illustrates the importance of reading for pleasure for both educational purposes, but also as well as personal development. It doesn't have to just be that reading is for school. They can read for their own personal development. You know, if they have an issue that they don't know how to tackle, maybe a book will help them to understand a character that has had to go through that issue, or an event that happens that they can really associate with. So it's not just about education, it's about personal development as well. Other benefits of reading for pleasure include text comprehension, grammar, positive reading attitudes, pleasure in reading in later life, and in general, increased general knowledge. But also it's really important for a child's well-being, and I am going to get some students to give you some of their own experiences today so that you can understand the importance of well-being in your child and reading. So new research for the National Literacy Trust shows us that children and young people who are engaged with reading and writing are 3 times more likely to have higher mental well-being than those who aren't. Perhaps because they are relating to the people within the books that they're reading and that they feel like they have that person to relate to, you know? Children and young people with above expected reading skills are 3 times more likely to have high mental well-being than those who are below expected reading skills. And boys who enjoy reading have higher mental well-being than girls who enjoy reading. So it's interesting to look at the facts and the statistics as, you know, what's happening. It also makes you feel better because you realise that it's not just your child, this is a global thing. Okay, I just wanted to show you this short video of a couple of authors talking about the beauty of reading and why it's important for their for our children. I'm only going to show some.
Line that I used in Game of Thrones, that a reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies, and the person who does not read lives only one. And I have lived 1,000 lives. I've gone to those planets. I've walked in Middle Earth. I've ridden with Ivanhoe in the Crusades and the Carnegies from King John. I've attended Republic of the Forest. I've climbed Mount Everest. I've done all of these things in the pages of the book.
What do you think about children and books and the importance of reading?
Reading is sitting on your parents' lap. Reading is a physical act. A book should be beautiful. Every book that's manufactured should have textures and qualities and smells as though it were a toy, as though it was something precious. And then when you're read to by a parent, mom or pop, and you're sitting on the lap and the body is there, then you have the whole thing. You have the total organization of parent, child, and book. Fusion. That's something television or any other form cannot give a human being.
Okay, so I wanted to just show you those two because those two are really expressing the way I feel about reading in terms of not only does it take you to all of these different places, he was saying that he's been running with Robin Hood, he's been with kings, he's experienced all of those different things. It's also about the connection that reading has. It's very much, I know in this day and age we're all very busy, but just having that connection with your parents with reading as well definitely has an impact and an association with reading itself. And there's lots of things I'm going to try and give you some advice on ways that we can support that, okay? Okay, so. Okay, so the purpose of this session is to give you some ideas on how we can cultivate a reading habit. I'm going to give you some ideas myself, but I've also got students because who better to ask than teenagers themselves on ways that they have had their own experience of reading and how they've overcome those experiences, okay? So the first thing, I want us to use this analogy, and this is something you could use with your children. If your child is into going to the gym, or they're into sport, or they're into exercise, you could use the analogy that going to the gym and gaining muscle is the same as reading is to your brain. So every time you read a book, you're gaining the memory, the muscle, the vocabulary, all of those kinds of things. It's the equivalent of the same thing. If you are somebody that wants to get muscles and you go to the gym once in 3 months, you're not going to get the same benefits as if you read every single day and you'll go to the gym every single day. So this is something I try and tell the students as well, because it's becoming more and more with Instagram now that they want to look good and they want to have muscles for the pictures. But it's the same concept with the brain. If they want to become a lawyer, if they want to become an engineer, they have to do the same thing with their brain as well as their body. It's also about building healthy habits. So one thing you could do is you could read to your child. So you read them a storybook. You can model good habits of reading in front of your child. So maybe you could have a dedicated time of night where you all sit together and you read together. Me and my husband have made a point that we put our phones away and we spend 10 minutes a night reading together so that we're not just sitting in bed and looking through Instagram, because I know that it's definitely addictive and it's a bad habit that you can get yourself into. Provide a consistent time to read each day without distractions of the media, okay? I know it's hard, but take the device away and put it away and say you're not having it until we've spent some time making sure that we're doing this reading together. Okay? They might resent it at first, but with all children, it's perseverance. It becomes a habit. It's building a habit. I think they say it takes 21 days to build a habit. Join public libraries, summer reading programs. I'm not sure if that's possible in your own countries, if you go home in the summer or if you're here. Are there any reading programs that you could join? Provide opportunities for your child to attend theatre performances, because this is just as much an appreciation of reading and literature as reading is. There's lots of great shows on at the Dubai Opera House. We also have a subscription to the National Theatre where they can watch Shakespeare plays or maybe ones that they're more interested in these days, musicals that they might relate to. All of those things are still appreciating literature, especially because in most cases the musical might have been changed from a book in the first place. Use reading software or online games. If you can't get them off the iPad, perhaps there is a reading software or online game apps that are still educational, things that my students are about to talk to you in a second, okay? And provide activities that relate to reading and writing in daily life. So maybe get them to write a shopping list and then read the shopping list out to you when you go shopping, or get them to write a journal of what happened during that day when you spent the day together. Okay, that might be easier for your younger year 7, 8, and 9. Might be a little bit more tricky with 10 and 11, but it's worth a go. Okay, I'm going to pass you over to Khadija. She's going to talk to you about well-being. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Khadija. I'm a year 13 IB student in Ms. Bradley's class. And so today I'll be talking about how to get your children reading, but through the perspective, keeping in mind well-being as well. So like many of you, my parents try to get me on reading as well, and nagging me continuously, like reading through like newspapers or books or articles. And I was a stubborn child, so I'd always resent and say no to that. And one thing I've noticed along the way is that instead of nagging your child continuously, telling them to read, like Miss said, it kind of resents the kid and makes them not want to read, because it's a continuous pressure, I think, on the child's shoulders to reading is this. And my parents would give me analogies about reading is a best friend, like having a book is a best friend, like all those analogies you could possibly think of. So one thing I noticed was maybe like tone down a bit of the nagging. So pressurizing, give them space. One thing my dad used to always say, which kind of made me think, was tell your kids how important it is to stay bored. It sounds weird, but like letting your kids sit alone, sometimes just letting them think is very important. These days we're all on our devices. We have Instagram, Snapchat, like a various amount of apps and everything to keep us busy, especially in COVID as well. So the idea of telling your kid hey, it's important to sit down, relax, stay bored, not do anything is important as well. And one thing my parents kind of focused on was, instead of taking phones away, or it depends on every child, but my parents didn't think to take my phone away or anything like that. They did tell me hey, instead have a specific time, set times with your kids, like maybe you could do 2 hours a day maximum on your phone, or maybe 3 hours, let's say, depending on this stage. So just limiting phone amount, screen time and stuff like that. And when you do that, I've realized when you're sitting alone, then you realize, oh, okay, I have so many other things I could do. I could read, I could work, or I could maybe talk to people in the house and interact with people. So, and this is how my story went, because I used to, hate is a strong word, but I used to dislike reading a lot, because I'd always get pressured into reading. Teachers would try to get me into reading, and my parents would try and everything, and I'd always resent. So I remember what my parents did was, instead, I know Kinokuniya is a great bookstore, it's huge and everything, but I feel like it could be overwhelming for a child who doesn't like to read, sending them out there in the bookstore and being okay, you gotta go grab a book and get one by the time you come back. Instead, let your child explore and help them navigate through different things. One thing I would suggest is that take them into local libraries, because it's more quieter, and so the child can go inside inside the library and kind of explore on their own. One place I really suggest is it's a place on the beach, and it's called #BookHero. I don't know if you guys have heard about it. Sukaim Road. And it's this wonderful place in the sense that there is a coffee shop, and it's a very family-oriented place. So there's coffee and drinks and snacks, but there's a book it's a library, like a mini library, and it has all sorts of books, like different genres. Like it could be educational books, like academic books, or like non-fiction, fiction. So it varies, you know. And there are games over there, so just, you know, spending quality time, and then slowly I noticed that, you know, you can lean into those as well because it kind of looks nice. So you kind of lean towards like, okay, let me go look at some of the books that are in there, and it's nice to, you know, let your kids explore that as well. So really what I want you to take away from this is that, you know, letting your child know how important it is to sit down, because in these days, you know, self-care is often, you know, put aside. So really tell your children to prioritize their self-care and mental well-being, and let them, you know, think and reflect, because reflection in this time is very important as well. And just you know, instead of nagging them or like taking their phones away, depends on like really the child as well. Set time, set boundaries, maybe screen time boundaries, screen time hours. Take them to a local library, and don't put the pressure on them like, okay, we're going to the library, you have to get a book. Tell them to go and explore, and I bet you that they're gonna come back with a book without you, you know, pressuring them. So yeah, one main takeaway is just letting them explore and, you know, tone down the pressure. That's it. Yeah. Thank you. Oh yeah.
I was going to show this up at the time, and just move on to the next thing. Yeah.
Okay, so finding the right book. So this is navigating now. So like how you could allow or help your child, you know, find their genre they prefer. And another personal story with me was when I went to the library, my parents said, okay, go explore. And I did come back with a book. And you know, often we see how if the cover is nice, we'll bring it back home and we don't read the synopsis or anything like that. But I guess I read a bit of the synopsis, I was interested, and I got it home. And you could call it ego or whatever. I let it sit on the side for a couple of weeks, but slowly what I noticed was that I'd sit in my room alone and I'd just like think, and then slowly I'd lean towards the book. And I read the book in 2 days. I finished it because I was so hooked, and it's only because I was so into the genre, you know. So like I said, letting your kid explore, and also you can help them navigate, you know. If you know your child is into academic books or like you know, more behavioral issues, or like science fiction or like non-fiction, there's so many genres out there. So helping them navigate as well, because you know your kid the most. One personal example I can give is of my sister, who does not like to read books as well, and we're trying to get her in the pathway to read. And recently, a few weeks ago, we got a book on ego and how to, you know, not let ego get in the way. And we got the book, and my mom would be like, okay, you need to read the book, you need to read something, you need to spend time on reading, it's important. And she'd always resent as well, but slowly, because it was a book of her interest, you know, a psychological, you know, thinker, like almost, you could slowly see her when we all had, like Miss said, set aside some time, you know, family time or like phone aside time, no zero phone time and stuff. And you'd slowly see her when everyone was reading, she'd go grab that book. And then over a week, you could see that she was really getting into the book in the sense that she was highlighting, making notes, and you could see by the fact that she would come by you and she'd tell you, oh yeah, I learned this, and that today, and you know, this is a very good tip to suppress your ego. And she'd have discussions, you know, One way you can navigate your child genre preference is by having conversations about everything. I feel like that will just let you help you explore what your child is interested in, and then help them as well. So yeah, that's what I'd like you to take away from the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Khadija. And just to give you some context, Khadija is a higher level English language and literature IB student, and she's just done her extended essay on literature. So she is now reading.
I'm Salimatu Musa, as you can see, and I'm in year 13. Honestly, today I feel like online platforms get a lot of like bad, you know, representation, and as they should, because, you know, they represent a lot of distractions, you know. Instead of reading, what are we doing? Like, I'm guilty of this. I'm on Instagram instead of doing my homework and other things. But with online platforms, thank God that there is some good to it, and more than some good things, there is actually a a lot of helpful online platforms that are actually very educational and can also encourage people to start reading. What I like to do, this is a YouTube channel called TED Ed, and there's also crash courses. You know, sometimes when you're on YouTube, instead of doing your actual work, you find online recommendations of videos to watch, and they're actually related to things you're learning in class. So I used to take history, and I do psychology now. And these videos, they would come up and they would have stuff related to like history and psychology. And you start watching them and you actually get interested and you're actually learning through these videos. And instead of being online and it being a form of distraction, you're actually learning something new. And this is very helpful, to provide another kind of like mode for a child to like learn instead of, the typical reading, sitting down all day in class. And, sometimes some kids are better visual learners than they are, reading through a book or, just sitting and listening. These videos are actually very interactive and they span from English literature all the way to psychology and history. Yesterday, I actually found these videos explaining what metaphors is. And English language is mandatory from year 7 to like year 8 or, to year 13s and even in primary. And metaphor is, a figure of speech, and it's really important to learn, but some people don't get what it means. Like some kids still don't understand what metaphor is, but this video was very interactive and it was describing what a metaphor is through, showing the visuals, and it was actually very interactive. And through learning this, there are other videos with different types of figures of speech. And if a child can, learn through these online platforms, it shows that online platforms, aren't all that distracting. Some of them can actually be helpful. And some people have specific channels that cater to specific subjects. So I do chemistry, and one way that I learn is through, watching this guy online, and the way he visualizes things is actually another kind of option to learn something, to learn the same concept that we're learning in school, but in a much different way, and that can be supplementary to your learning. So instead of just reading from a textbook, you can actually learn from these online platforms. The Art of Metaphor video is also here, and under this video, specifically the English literature part, a part came up about different authors. It's like, why should you start reading books from Shakespeare? Why should you start reading books from Virginia Woolf? I actually watched the Virginia Woolf one, and instead of going online and reading a biography of Virginia Woolf or what kind of books she read, this video was like a short, like 5 to 10 minute video. And now I want to read about Virginia Woolf because the video was very interactive. It was kind of a summary of why I should read this author, and now I have like a book that I actually want to read. And showing that visual aspect of it made it very engaging, and now it's like something I want to do. And these online platforms, I really recommend showing them to your children because it expands your knowledge, and most of the stuff that I actually recommended are things we're already learning, whether it's from psychology or whether it's from English through the art of metaphor. And these platforms are actually very helpful because believe it or not, we can't really get rid of technology. It's such an integral part of our lives. So why not, find the good of it and start presenting that good aspect of it to our, to your children, and to us. So we don't only see the bad of technology and actually, make it into something good and, take the good out of it, because these videos are actually very helpful and very interactive. So I hope you start, engaging in these platforms and getting your kids to also engage in these platforms. Thank you.
And then I have Isabella. She's going to talk to you about some challenges that you can set for your children.
Hello, good morning. I'm Salele Iskandar. And I think that something I faced, like a personal challenge, was finding a way to read that would definitely, it become a game. It becomes something that'd be interactive between myself, my friends, my parents, my family members. And in my case, it was always the opposite. I was always interested in reading rather than, I'd look at a book and I'd be like, oh, that looks good. So I remember starting really young and becoming really hooked with a specific author, and then I wanted to just read everything from the author. But then once, I read everything from the author, it was a child author in Spanish, because that's another thing I'd like to touch upon later, kind of the challenges or barriers of language. But even though I read all of the books that this author had to provide at the time, I later was like, okay, what do I do? Where do I start? Which genre do I enjoy? Which author, which style of book, which all these different questions. And I came across one day in school actually a reading challenge, and this reading challenge basically was kind of like a bingo or even just a checklist that you'd go through, and then you'd have a month, 2 months, 3 months, even the whole school year sometimes. And this challenge would be one where you had to look up a book with the first letter of your name in the title, or you had to look for an author that came from your country, a type of book that was from the horror genre. So these different types of checklists, you can see there's a bingo, a reading challenge, all these things you can find online as well. So this also will provide those ones of your children that prefer using online platforms and images, but you could also print these out and give it to them, and allow them the opportunity to read through the challenges, different opportunities, and therefore they can make use of reading as a game. They can talk to other friends. They could form their own little book club, their own little community of readers, and through that they can learn about new shows that they're interested in, because most shows that we have nowadays that are really interesting. I know for teenagers, one that's really become a center of attention's Bridgerton, a new show. Those are based on novels. You have others, like we're studying in English, like The Handmaid's Tale. Also, now there's a TV show based on the novel. So through making these different connections, you gain new awareness of new novels, new authors, new genres that you may be interested in. That's something that I think is so important to promote. So I also, similar to Khadija, have a little sister, 12 years old, will not pick up a book. She will do every sport possible that there is. She will look at every video. She will be on every online platform, but she will not pick up a book. So similar to me, and well, in her case, it was to promote reading, I started printing off these checklists, and I started doing it with her, because that might be another challenge for your child, not finding someone that's willing to do this with them. So I remember when I was doing it, my father would get involved, and we'd both be doing it at the same time. And it'd be really fun, because it'd be, okay, who can read the most amount of books, or who can check out the most stuff on this checklist by the end of the month. Or, like I said, creating a book club. I managed to find 2-3 other friends that would be interested in doing this. And then I remember we were doing it for the longest time. We were enjoying it a lot. And then high school hit. So obviously it was like, a big, that was a challenge the whole time, constraint. But definitely by introducing a challenge and also some type of reward. I'm not saying, that you should promote this idea that rewards are given out for good behavior, because at one point in life you realize you grow up enough to know that, you'll do something good and you won't get recognized for it. But that's the way how it is. But I think that you start small. You start by introducing freedoms or opportunities, something Ms. Bradley will definitely talk about a bit later. But even by doing that, something as simple as picking out the movie that you're going to watch at the end of the week on the weekend, on that Friday evening, by reading and doing that challenge with your kids, or by them doing it with their friends, and then you having some type of little fun pop quiz at the end to see if they've actually read the book or they've understood it, is definitely something that I think encourages reading to a great extent, and something that just makes it so much more fun. And really quickly to talk about language. So I'm someone that talks Spanish, English fluently. I speak them both. They're both like my pretty much native tongues. I'm from Venezuela. So definitely, I think when I started reading, it was, mainly Spanish, as that was my first language, and then kind of this transition into reading. And there's, nowadays we're third culture kids, we're kids that have lived in different countries, have been outside of our home countries, maybe because of political, social, economic instability. There's so many issues to highlight and to touch upon. But I think that doesn't matter which language, is your native tongue, or if you speak English, it's so important to promote that they speak or that they're reading in, particularly in those different languages that you speak at home. So something that I started doing was researching authors in my native language, in Spanish, and I came across great novels like 100 Years of Solitude, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, a great novel I personally enjoy. I love classics myself, so it started off by looking into that genre, looking into the authors within that, and reading these different novels. And I also have a list of recommendations in Spanish and Arabic, as I'm also part Lebanese, so there's also that. But through reading in different languages, you're not only promoting that they have this comprehension of the language, but you're also making sure that they have this consistency with the way that they're able to communicate, because I feel, in my case, reading is such a large passion, something I love so much, that I think that when you know how to read something, you know how to interpret something in different languages, you become universally aware of things. And books, I think, are one of these things that they're universal concepts within the pages of a novel. Doesn't matter the genre, doesn't matter if it's horror, you'll always learn a lesson that you can apply to the real world, you can apply to life, you can learn from the past, look towards the future, and that's something that novels will do regardless of language. And nowadays we have this amazing benefit, which is technology has enabled us to have different versions and different languages of the novel. So I know The Little Prince, for example. I read it in Spanish, but it's also in French, it's in English, it's in German, it's in Mandarin, it's in every language now. So make sure if they've enjoyed a book, you find maybe an author that's similar, just in your native language, and also promote that reading to happen at home. So through both setting challenges, making these fun games, and ensuring that language is a necessary essential part of communication and of reading within your child's life, I definitely think that they'll get that interest in reading, and those barriers that you might have, no time, no anything, they'll start slowly fading as soon as they realize the true essence and the benefits that reading truly has in your life. Thank you.
Okay, so just leading on from what Isabella says, one thing that we have to do at IB is we study 2 texts in translation at higher levels. So we study them in English, but they've originally been written in a different language, because it's also interesting to see how the translation might change the meaning as well. So that's something you could also get the students to do if they are bilingual and you want them to encourage them to read in both of their languages. So I will send this PowerPoint to you, but the links to the book challenges that you can also do online are there as well. There is also an Audible challenge. So if your child struggles with the physical reading, one of my suggestions a bit later is Audible, and getting them to listen to audiobooks just as much as reading a book, or following along with an audiobook whilst they're reading the book if it's the concentration thing that's a struggle. And one of the things that Isabella said was maybe you could do rewards. Now, it could be monetary, or it could be things like having a movie night together, or a trip to the cinema, or day out with a friend. So if you do one of the reading challenges together and they do succeed, then this is something that you can say, I'm so proud of you, like, well done, let's go and do something together, especially if they're a bit younger, where they do need the praise and they do need the encouragement, okay? So another example of ways we can promote it is a Kindle. A Kindle is a device, so we can trick them into thinking they have a device, but actually they can't get distracted on other platforms because it is just the books that are there. But it also gives us more access to a range of different books. So if it is something that your child feels that they don't have enough access to books that they like, a Kindle is the way forward, because you could just go online and you can buy the book that they want to have immediately. I think there's also free Kindle platforms that you can download, and you can just get free books to see how they are with the genre first, and then start buying the ones that they're interested in. Now, this is more for younger children, but I had to show you this because my mum got this for my son at Christmas, and it has been a godsend. This is called a Tony box, and what happens is you buy the box and the figure, and you can buy all the different figures, and when you put the figure on top of the box, it reads the story to the children. And it's just fantastic. I put it on before my son goes to bed, and he listens to it and falls asleep to it. You can also buy the books with them and read the book alongside it, but it's fantastic because the person reading it is either the author or somebody that can do amazing intonation and voices with the characters so they can make it more engaging. Some of them have songs attached to them. I bought him Elmo because he loves Sesame Street. We've also got the Gruffalo, we've got the Stickman, all of those for younger children. Or even up to, I would say probably up to about 12 maybe, from up to 12. My niece has just got one and she is 6. So I know it's for younger ones, but I just feel that that's a good way to start if you do have younger children, is to get them appreciating reading through one of these boxes, getting them to follow the story as it's being read. And sometimes I know because we are busy, if we don't necessarily have time to read to them ourselves, or if we're tired, this is the way forward. You could just sit next to them on the bed and read it with them alongside this. So I had to recommend it because honestly, I love it. It's great. So that's for younger students, but we also have Audible, so students can also listen to audiobooks while they fall asleep or when they go to bed. You know, if there's somebody I know that I very much struggle with, if I've got a lot going on, my brain overthinks and I can't concentrate on reading. Especially now I've had my son, you lose that ability to concentrate and spend time zoning out. So audiobooks have been the way forward for me in terms of actually reading for pleasure as opposed to reading the things I have to teach in class. Ask them questions. So, you know, you can monitoring by asking them literal questions. So, what are you reading about? Oh, what happened in that book? You know, why do you think that they chose that word to describe that? What does that word mean? Just simple questions to show them, one, that you're interested, and two, for you to check that they do understand and that they are reading it properly. Read a story or have your child read to you, which is what I've mentioned earlier. You can have your child pick their favourite part of the story. Ask them if there's a problem, what do you think they could have done to solve that? What do you think is going to happen next in the novel? Oh, that's a sad ending, how would you change the ending of that story? Those are the kinds of ways we can get them to really think outside of just what they're reading as well. Audiobooks to follow with text. Have your children make a list of things that could never happen, things that might happen, and things that are sure to happen in the book. Compare and contrast the movies with the books. So if they do like the book, allow them to watch the movie. Oh, did you like that movie? Was it the same? No, I didn't like it. It wasn't as good as the book. Even the Harry Potter series, they cut lots out of the movie. And if they've read the book, lots more happens in the book than what happens in the movie. Provide magazines, newspapers, especially at the moment with things that are going on in the world, helping them to understand what's happening, reading the newspaper, asking them how they feel, asking them what they understand, what do you think is going to happen because of this, and just getting them to think about larger society. I've also said reading also encourages writing, so perhaps you can get them to do journal writing. You know, journaling is one of the greatest ways for well-being in terms of writing down your feelings, writing down, you know, maybe you could write a list of the books you want to read and check them off. Maybe you could write a list of the movies you want to read or the places you want to go. Maybe they could write letters to pen pals. I know it's kind of been and gone now, but perhaps instead of writing them a message on Facebook, we can get them to write the message down and we can send it to family members in other countries or something like that to get them to encourage them to write. Get them to write a story or a song or a poem, conversation. All of those kinds of things are going to keep developing. I'm going to send you this PowerPoint so that you do have access to these slides. Another thing that the students said to me is making it relatable. So nowadays, they love football, they love singers, lots of them have their own autobiography. So if they're not somebody that's interested in fiction, it could be that you get them to read one of their favourite football players' autobiography and how they got into football. It's still reading and it's still going to benefit them. Harry Styles, they all love, well, I don't know if they do now. I thought I was cool, but apparently I'm not. I don't really know who the people are now in these days. And then I'm just going to finish with a little task I did with our students in an assembly. I tried to make it relatable by getting them to appreciate that literature is no different from the singers that they listen to now. So I showed them a quote, and I'm going to get you guys to do this as well. Maybe it's hatred I spew, maybe it's food for the spirit. Do you think that this is a line from a Shakespeare play, poetry, a rap, or song lyrics? So, does anyone think this is Shakespeare? Poetry? Rap? You think it's rap? Song lyrics? Yeah? So this is actually Eminem, probably somebody that they know and they like now. But when they first read it, they're like, oh, this is poetry, oh. And then you're like, actually, guys, no, it's not, it's Eminem, you know? Men would rather use their broken weapons than their bare hands. Othello, Shakespeare. All I ask of you, if any hope remains, is to answer me, please, and heal my pain. Sometimes they assume, because it's rhyming, it's a song, or it's a poem. It is a poem, but it's one of Sheikh Mohammed's poem. He writes a lot of poetry, and this is one from him. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. Who do you think? You think rap? Their immediate association with this is Shakespeare because of Macbeth, and they assume that Macbeth, but it's actually Stormzy, one of their favourite rappers. So making it relatable to them by getting them to understand that a rapper is just as much as an author as somebody that writes a book, I feel helps them. They all felt very embarrassed when I showed them this because they constantly come in like, oh, poetry's so rubbish, miss. So I give them lyrics to a song and I get them to analyse it and then I play it to them and the music changes their opinion. We have T.S. Eliot, sorry. How can something so familiar be so strange? Sounds like poetry. It's Drake. I had a dream. I got everything I wanted. Not what you think. And if I'm being honest, it might have been a nightmare. Sounds like a story. It is Billie Eilish, somebody that they're very familiar with these days, okay? So that's how I try to make children understand and make it relatable. So that's something you can also do. Maybe you can get them to read song lyrics, and then when they tell you, oh, I don't want to read this, Mum, it's rubbish, and you say, well, that's your favourite singer, what are you talking about, you know? It's a way of making them understand the beauty and the passion of reading. So, I hope you can take away some things from this. I know every child is different, and so not everything is going to work. You have to see what works for you and your children, but hopefully there's enough in there that you can take away some ideas on how you can cultivate a habit in your teenagers. Does anybody have any questions? No? Fabulous. Go on.
So, like, I just want to hear from you. She mentioned that how to, just get them started, right? Like, that's the tough part because what I've observed with my son, that he gets onto reading and he's interested and he loves, he enjoys when he's doing the comprehension and then he's eager to know what will happen next.
But it's getting them into that point.
Yeah.
And I think that is where we have to create the habit. We have to make it a thing. So not pestering like she was saying, but making it as a family thing, this is what we're going to do. Let's spend 10 minutes together reading a book. Even if it's just 10 minutes, it's a start. Or say, oh, I saw this book, can you just read it to me because I'm really interested? And then maybe he'll get started in that way. Getting teenagers started is the hardest thing. And to be honest, it's the hardest thing for us as adults as well. So we understand and we know, but what would we do? And how can we do that with our children?
Like maybe like having discussions with them on the topic, like trying to
Trick them.
Yeah,
Trick them into thinking.
Like making them think that they're mature, they're adults now, having those conversations. It could be about like a subject they're reading, like maybe making connections, like, oh, you told me this about like, in your psychology class, how is this relating to this book and stuff like that, just making connections. And like Isabella said, setting aside time and just like making challenges for the kids, making it exciting for the end of the day. We even, create characters from the book.
Yeah, that's really good. And they love it when you put voices on when they're younger. That's their favourite thing is when the teacher puts on a voice. They're like, oh, great. Yeah? Yes.
I just want to share something. My daughter, you said that there are 2 periods in a week.
Yeah.
One is called study,
Yeah.
the other is called I don't know what. But it's in her head that that period is actually
Playtime.
used for studying for the exam
So-
rather than for reading.
So they should have 2. What we said to them, what we said to them is that one of them is reading and then the next one is studying. Because what we found was a lot of the students were just playing on their devices and playing games. And that defeats the point of those study sessions. So what we said was one of the sessions is everything's away and they just have a book, no devices. And then the next session they can do studying because we've been trying to encourage them to do their coursework in those sessions as well for English, and they might have maths coursework or science coursework. So we've been trying to, it's from January we've been trying to push it, but it's a journey.
Maybe you can name one of the subjects as reading.
Well, that's what we're going to do next year. We can't change it now, but that's something we've discussed as having it as a sole reading session. Yes. I can give you these which are for boys, but some of the girls have sent me lots of book recommendations. So when I send the PowerPoint, I will send a list of recommendations as well. It can be, yeah, some of them are primary. Weirdly as well, obviously with teenagers these days, in school we have to be very careful because we have to make sure that the content that we teach them and the content that they read is appropriate. But obviously at home you might feel a bit more comfortable with them reading certain aspects because you know they can handle it. But we just have to be very careful. So some recommendations we do have, obviously tread carefully with them, just because we wouldn't want you to come across an issue. Believe it or not, they love those issues the most, but we just have to be careful that it's acceptable for them. One of the students' favourite book is Dear Evan Hansen, and it's actually a musical now, but it's about suicide. So we have to be, and 13 Reasons Why is one of the brilliant books that's now a TV series, but it's just helping them to understand that before they start reading that kind of content. Yeah? Yeah? Yes, I will talk to you about that now. I'm going to leave this here. I think this is a evaluation form. If you could grab one of those and fill those in, and if you do have any more questions, I'll be around. Help yourself to tea or coffee, and I'll just stay around if you want to ask me any more. Okay? Yes. Yeah?
And like for the past 2-3 years, it's very difficult to switch the style of reading.
Yeah. But do you know what? If he's reading, then allow him to do that. Eventually he'll get to a point where he'll want to branch off himself, I think. We study a lot of things in English itself, which are different genres. We do a lot of plays, we do a lot of poetry, we do a lot of novels, which are probably different. But I wouldn't discourage him from reading what he likes, because I think the fact that he's reading is a bonus. So I can suggest other authors, but if he's interested in one thing, it's difficult to make them change their mind. Yeah, I would just let him read what he enjoys reading, definitely. He'll run out eventually.